Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio.
Let's do it. There's been big news just overnight with Twitter that Elon Musk did a Twitter Space, did an interview with James Clayton from the BBC. He doesn't always give much warning when he's doing these interviews, as we noticed several months back with some of these. I mean, there'd be some notice, but not usually from him. He actually did a tweet saying in 10 minutes he would be doing this interview. I thought, wow, well, that was really nice of him to do a heads up. But interesting that it was with the BBC, considering there's been this huge thing last week about how Twitter decided to label the BBC Twitter account as government-funded media, which really got things charged up recently. And so I thought it was interesting, like, oh, he actually sat down with a journalist from the BBC. And so what were your first thoughts when you heard about this interview?
Well, I woke up to a flurry of DMs, and obviously my timeline was kind of full of it. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Once again, we're still waiting for Elon to host the space, aren't we? This was yet again another one that was hosted by the Twitter account. Elon was then a speaker in the space, as was James Clayton, as you say, from the BBC. Yeah, when I first saw it, I was thinking, was this an interview that was specifically around that issue that has caused so much fuss this week around the government-funded media tag? But it sort of becomes quickly apparent once they get chatting that it's sort of just a Q&A, really, a bit of an ask me anything. Elon appears to be there to, I don't know, answer those questions, some of those questions, or at least, talk around the points that people have been talking about over the last couple of weeks. And he did talk a little bit about Spaces in there as well. I mean, once again, I was completely confused by the first 15 minutes of the space. It was a very odd start to it, considering he'd given that 10-minute warning. So for anyone who hasn't been into the space yet, there's around 10 minutes of the Twitter account just playing the music, just the automatic music that they've added to Spaces. Which, okay, but there were no speakers there. There was no nothing. There was just the Twitter account playing the music. And then once Elon did start to speak, at first it seemed as though both Elon and James were going to literally be just coming through Elon's account. Like, they couldn't get James to appear as a speaker, even though he was kind of continually saying, oh, I should be in the space now, and he's not there. And then someone must hit a button at sort of 15 minutes and his little profile picture suddenly bounces into the shot. But, it was just all a little bit janky and a bit odd. And Elon still clearly has kind of not really he doesn't know his way around Spaces very well, does he? It's kind of embarrassing. You sort of hear him guffawing his way through the first few minutes where they're trying to set it all up. And you just think, oh, this is quite a big deal. He's there saying, oh, we've got, goodness knows how many thousand people listening to us here. And they were streaming it elsewhere as well for the BBC. And James says, we've got cameras here and, we're recording this interview for the BBC. And they've obviously decided to do Twitter Spaces as an extra layer to that, which I think is, nice idea. But, just all a bit of an odd kerfuffle start, really, I felt.
It really was. And I put a tweet in the nest from Andrew at Spaces Dashboard where he says, you can just fast forward to the 15-minute mark where it really gets started for the interview part. But I just want to point out with this tweet from Andrew, this is a brilliant tweet for marketing, by the way, because, he utilizes the media studio in Twitter. There's a way where you can, not everybody has it though. It's very strange. It's a feature that some people have, not everybody. The way on desktop, click on the more in your navigation, go to Creator Studio. And if you see Media Studio, then you have access. And what Andrew has been able to do is utilize some of the extra features you get in there or actually, I think you could just do it direct. I think what he's doing, you could actually bypass Media Studio and just go to the ads platform. As long as you have a credit card on file and have the ads platform turned on, you don't have to buy ads. You don't have to turn on the credit card, but just you have to have one on file to access it. But you get these extra features. And in this tweet at the bottom, it actually says Discovery powered by Spaces dashboard. And it's set so that when you click on the image or that bottom part, it will take you to whatever link he sets in this tweet. And he sets it directly to this space. So I just thought the way he did, so not only was this a helpful tweet because he says, hey, just fast forward to the 15-minute mark to listen if you want to just get to the actual interview with Elon and James Clayton. But I just thought this was a brilliant marketing tweet if you're marketing your spaces, and just wanted to show that off to everyone because I think we can all learn from some of the ways that Andrew is really smart when it comes to his marketing.
Yeah, I do like this tweet. However, wouldn't it have been great if Twitter or Elon or anyone had set the start point on the replay to 15 minutes?
Oh my gosh, that was my first thought. It's like, why to start at 0 with the odd background music that went on forever? It's like, and I think it just shows that he's not really familiar with the features, and whoever set up that space at Twitter. But let's not forget what happened to the original Spaces team. They don't work there anymore. So I guess whoever is on the team right now was not proficient with, little things in spaces. Like and we just talked about this last week, right? When you finish your space, take a moment. You will do a big service to all your replay listeners by just setting a start time when you actually start whatever it is you're using the space for. So yeah, I was surprised at how much forwarding I had to do to actually get to something of substance.
Yeah, me too. And it's such a little thing. But as you say, it's just another little note that they just don't seem to understand what they're dealing with or what they're playing with there. And I just found it embarrassing, Elon kind of laughing his way through trying to get the speakers on board and getting the space set up. It was a bit cringy.
Yeah. And then what I thought was interesting is a few minutes after the space started, that Morgan had tweeted out that he did a screenshot showing all these bots that were taking over spaces during that time. It was quite interesting. So,
yeah, I mean, as Morgan's tweet says, just boosting all the biggest Twitter spaces, there seem to be, he says there's 40 spaces have over 1,000 accounts in them. And yeah, completely flooded. I think I saw another tweet as well that was sort of saying, oh, all these bots were around like half an hour before Elon Space. Isn't that funny? Isn't that a bit odd? You get an influx of bots, you get Elon there, and then you get a complete and utter confusion fest over how many people are actually in Elon's space and how many are listening, how many are listening to a replay, all of that. I mean, the stats that came out of that was it was bonkers.
I saw more talk about that than anything else. There was a lot of confusion, and a lot of people thought there was like over 3 million. Even when you listen to the space towards the end, when they started doing some Q&A, somebody was like, there's 3 million people here. And Elon's like, really? I mean, there was quite a bit of talk about that during the space and then afterwards. But then some people did some investigation, like Chris Messina here with this tweet saying, it really wasn't, millions and millions. Like it was interesting how on some screens it would show you one number, but then you go into the space bar and you get a completely different number. So he did a screenshot. I saw other people posting screenshots about this as well. So it was just a lot of confusion as to what was the true number of, just kind of shows you that Twitter is a bit broken these days, that things don't work properly.
Yeah. I mean, as we've said, it certainly seems like it was, should we call it a bug? I don't know. But it did look like it had 3.3 million listeners when it was live. But then I think I've seen, Morgan certainly tweeted a minute afterwards that had shuffled quite a long way back down to like 590,000 or something, which, is a way off 3 million.
And then this tweet I found from this guy, Theo, says, that it did not have 3.3 million listeners. That and this is odd, and I don't know how he knew this. He said that Spaces has a bug that forces listeners to disconnect, and then when they reconnect, they're recounted. And I was like, what? That's crazy. So I don't know. There was definitely a lot of speculation as to what was up with these numbers.
I mean, it's crazy, but it's not unbelievable considering we've started this space today by saying how glitchy this week it has been. It wouldn't be completely out of the universe of ideas that would have happened, that listeners being forced to disconnect, and then when they come back in, they're being counted again, and possibly being counted more than once when they come back in. It's a very strange phenomenon.
It really, really is. And then I love this tweet you found from Tech Talks about talking about Elon. Like,
just a single line. Did Elon single-handedly bring back social audio? I mean, we've seen a lot of platforms fall over the last few weeks, Madeline. We've talked about Reddit Talks has disappeared. Spotify Live has gone. Amazon AMP is kind of crawling its way into an exclusive hole that is kind of untouchable. And some of the neater, kind of smaller little standalone apps that we've discussed over the years are also fading and disappearing too. So, did Elon single-handedly bring back social audio by having, quote, 3 million people in a space? Who knows?
Exactly. And then I just put in the nest from Morgan. He said possibly these bots could have been a glitch with them while registering the same listeners more than once. So who knows? Something was definitely going on, because if you go back to when this space was live, you'll see people that took multiple screenshots where one screen showed them one number and another screen would be like hundreds of thousands versus millions. And it's like, okay, what's going on here? It's not like a little off. They were way off.
So do we put it past him that he might have inflated the numbers somehow by sweet talking an engineer that may or may not have been around at the time to make it look like his space was really, really busy to attract more people into it? Because the minute you see those big numbers, the minute you see a space that says it's got hundreds of thousands of people and you see that it's got Elon in there, it's going to attract even more people. So, do we think they might have played with it?
Honestly, nothing surprises me anymore when it comes to Twitter and Elon. So who knows? But I do agree with this tweet. I think Elon has done a really good job of getting people excited about social audio on Twitter. Every time he's in Spaces, even though it hasn't been very often lately, like he just hasn't been doing them as much. But when he is in Spaces, it does attract a lot of people. I think it just serves as this big reminder, like, hey, Spaces is here. What a great way to connect with people. And it seems like more people are using it when they get on there and listen to him use it.
Yeah, I'd like to think that, but I think it's more that people are kind of rubbernecking on, oh no, what's Elon going to say now? What's the next thing that he's going to do? Is he about to announce that Twitter's going away even? All those kind of things. He's using the feature, which we've always been encouraged by. He sort of felt like if he never took to Spaces, then it was most certainly something that you could have seen being cut. He obviously sees some value in it, and he's been using it fairly often. I mean, we had a few months after his, hissy fit where the journalists and all of that kind of thing, that he went quite quiet. But in recent weeks, he has been back a couple of times. So, yeah, it's strange. But I do wonder whether or not, even those hundreds of thousands of people that have been in the space are there really just to earwig and see what it is that he's going to say next, rather than being sort of really interested in him using Spaces, particularly as he doesn't even seem to really know how to use it very well.
So Twitter Daily News, as soon as the space was over, did a clever tweet. It said, opinion. We need to have a Twitter space with Elon about upcoming features of Twitter. Tired of interviews that focus on culture wars. So I was like, yes, please. Let's, because we kind of we were spoiled. This old Spaces team would always do these updates and do Spaces sharing things that were going on. And it was so refreshing. And then Elon replied to this tweet saying, yeah. So he agrees that they should have Spaces talking about upcoming features. So at least he's listening. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We didn't know how well. I think we did know how good we had it. I think it was all so open, and it was lovely to be able to connect with the engineers and the different people that we spoke to. Danny Singh, just so many of them. Quinn.
It was a great team.
Yeah, and they all were passionate about spaces and were building spaces, and it was really wonderful to feel part of that community, and that is something I really do miss on Spaces now. Whether or not they could ever rebuild something like that, I don't know, but it would be nice to feel like there's someone on the other end listening and talking as well, because that's what this is all about.
Exactly. And when I was listening to the replay of this space, when you get down to the very end, there was some Q&A, and I had to make a screen grab of this. So I got a little short video I did off my phone where during this Q&A, one of the people that had gone up on stage there, he requested a desktop version of Spaces so that he could connect his nice microphone. And we've asked for this before with the previous Spaces team, right? And I remember they even had a space with the Twitter team talking about how that was going to be coming at some point, that they were working on have the ability on desktop to speak as a speaker instead of mobile only. With desktop, we can only listen, but we can't speak. And so somebody mentioned this to him, and he was like, yeah. I mean, there is something they're looking into. So, I mean, he's listening. It's just a shame that the only people that can get his attention these days and ask him these questions for all of us are people he's very close with. Whereas previously with the old Spaces team, they would listen to all of us. We could all get up on stage during their space and ask them questions and inquire about things. And back in those early beta host days, they used to DM me and ask me about things that what things could I use? What would I like as a host? So at least this guy in the space during Q&A asked about desktop so we could have our nice mics. I mean, we're doing our workarounds with our gear to do this and record and use our nice mics, but Suze, wouldn't it just be so much easier to just go right through our computers?
Yeah, and I felt like that was the next thing on the roadmap that we were waiting for when it all just imploded this time last year. It felt like, that was the next step. They got everything else sort of to a level that was working quite well. It was quite stable. And then the next step was going to be this desktop version that allowed this connection.
So we ended up having a lot of Twitter news today. I was actually surprised because if I recall, I think a day or two ago, we didn't even have anything to talk about with Twitter yet. So a lot has happened since last night with Twitter that gave us plenty to talk about today. So we actually have a little bit of Clubhouse news that you wanted to share.
Yes. So this is a tweet from Michael Sterling, who I can see in the space, just reminding us that yesterday, Clubhouse actually switched all the clubs over, or started to switch clubs over from being clubs to being houses, which is this new Clubhouse 2.0. We've spoken about it quite a lot on All Things Audio over the last few weeks and months. April the 11th, clubs were changed into houses. You're still able to go over there, have your conversations, talk with people. But they basically built in these, they built in kind of extra features now that it's called a house. So you've got things like the lounge that's available to you, and the house chat, and the private hallway. So it's just kind of changing the direction, really, a little bit of what they're doing over there. And what were once clubs are now referred to as houses. And they have some of these additional features that were bolted on. Perhaps we can go into that in a bit more depth in a moment once we open up the mics. There are just a couple more things as well that we've found. So Matt Navarra tweeted out about Meta updating the audio encoding for Reels and Stories over on Instagram. Now, this is like totally audio nerding for me because I love a bit of loudness talk and a bit of luffs. So essentially, if you think about it, the audio that people, from the videos that people are uploading into Reels and stories over on Facebook are all at different volumes. No one's recording and making sure that they're leveling to a certain point, which means that sometimes you'll be scrolling through, watching someone's video and their audio might be quite quiet, and then the next one might come on and it'll be really loud, and then the next might come on and it'll be quiet again. And so you're kind of constantly flipping the volume up and down. So what they're saying they've done is that they've implemented this new algorithm, which basically sorts out that inconsistent audio and just levels it all out for everybody. So there shouldn't be any of that inconsistent volume between different things, no matter who's uploaded what at what level anymore, which for an audio geek like me is really exciting. And there's a lovely piece from social media today that's been tweeted out that explains it a little bit further. And I'm sure you can dive even deeper into it beyond that if you really want to. But yeah, effectively, it just means that you're not going to have to be flicking your volume up and down between videos over on Meta platforms anymore.
I knew you would be excited about that news because that is very audio geeky, but it was so interesting. And kudos to Meta for enhancing audio over there.
It is. I don't think people realise sometimes that actually it's quite important. Like for me in podcasting, the last thing I will do is make sure that everything is levelled to the right lufs, which is like the volume levelling, in the hope that your podcast doesn't come out louder than the next podcast someone's going to listen to or the previous podcast that they listen to. That there are a lot of people who just upload their audio to a podcast platform without doing that, and that's when that volume discrepancy creeps in. But yeah, I am a bit of a loudness nerd. It has to be said. This next one is about Discord. So the subscription tier of Discord, Nitro, has now added a soundboard. I believe this was another tweet from Michael, so thank you very much. They've added all sorts of things over there. But yeah, this soundboard is quite interesting. One of the things that caught my eye in this Engadget article here is the fact that they have preloaded the soundboard up with audio files, which I'm sure we could have a quiz and you could probably tell me without knowing which ones there are. There are indeed a quack, an air horn, a sad horn, a siren, a fart, a badum-tis, a cricket. But the bit that excited me was that community leaders over on Discord are actually able to upload their own sounds, which was something that I always thought would have been fun over here on Twitter when we had the soundboard. So yeah, it's an interesting extra layer for subscribers over there, and just another little audio tidbit for all things audio.
Yeah, very interesting. It was really cool news to hear about that because Discord is still very popular, and it's a place to go, and audio is big over there. It's very much like here. It's like Spaces.
Yeah, it always was. I mean, in my head, it's kind of one of the original social audio platforms, if you like. I know gamers were, very much use Discord to chat to one another while they're gaming, and that in my mind was kind of one of its primary uses. And then obviously when we've got all this social audio coming in, they kind of upped their game and spoke more about what you could do over there. But yeah, I mean, lots of people will have trundled over to Discord to have a look at Midjourney, not necessarily for audio, but there's a ton of AI stuff going on over there. And yeah, there's lots of things happening. But to hear that the soundboard's been added, I mean, the soundboard over here, I don't know if it was ever very useful particularly, but it was a nice little addition. If you're going to have audio, then why not have something that can add a little bit of a flourish and a bit of difference and a bit of fun to it. Yeah, it's just good to see that they've added that in. There's this piece we've got here saying Twitter's changed back the BBC profile. So earlier we were saying about how the government-funded tag had been added to the BBC profile, and that had caused a bit of a furore. Apparently they've now changed it back. I wonder if that's as a result of actually having a chat with James Clayton yesterday. For who knows? NPR has quit Twitter. Which was the big news that's happened in sort of the last few hours, really. There's a lot of upset going on right now with some really big players. It's quite unnerving.
It really is. I mean, you're hearing about more and more journalists, and now these news organizations that are packing up and leaving. And I really feel like Twitter has been such a great platform because of all the real-time news and having, journalists from all over the world here, every news organization. If they start having an exodus, it's going to really be concerning of what Twitter will turn into without that real-timeness of news.
Yeah. I've added Paul Armstrong as speaker because it was him that's DM'd me this piece. So, Paul, what do you think of all this? What's going on?
Oh, I don't read the BBC stuff. I don't know, but if I was the BBC and said like Twitter, they have so many accounts on Twitter. It's ridiculous. They have so much influence and so much sway. I don't think Elon's quote unquote using finger wiggles scared of anyone, or at least like outwardly, but then he has other people go, no, you need them on here. Like you need to do that. Don't annoy them, get them right. And that's the thing. That's probably what's happened. But I wanted to, the reason why I stuck my hand up is I wanted to ask everybody what they thought of Substack Notes opening, because obviously they have the podcast element as well. And I was looking at some of the people on there that are going over and sort of sniffing around and that sort of thing. And they said, oh, this is going to be really interesting for audio, because you could leave audio notes and that sort of stuff. So quite an interesting sort of new feature for a platform that has a lot of brain on it. Certainly a lot of people on Twitter. And obviously last week, Twitter banned Substack links for a couple of days. So it's been a bit of a dramatic sort of time for Substack writers, but I just wondered what people thought of that, really.
Yeah, that really upset a lot of people with, losing that ability to link to your Substack. And that just had come out of left field. And that pissed off a lot of journalists that rely on Substack to they use Twitter to help get the word out, but it's really their Substack where people get the full news. And yeah, I mean, that was pretty crazy, but I've been hearing more and more about the Substack Notes. It sounds interesting. Have you actually seen it, Paul? Have you played with it at all or know much about it where you can kind of explain it to our listeners?
I was whopped on the beta because, what do you call it? What Did Amazon Do This Week is a bestseller off of Substack. So it does all right, as they say. And this is the first time I've ever been on a beta for Substack, I must admit. And it's very, very early days for it. But it's super cute. It's very white spacey, no ads, few sort of like recommendations of people to follow or rather subscribe and that sort of thing. It's a really good mechanic. If you're on there, you can see how you could sort of like get extra subscribers very quickly and sort of have an extra sort of detailed chat with people. But it's interesting when you consider also that the audio functionality on Substack is being improved, so that people can have a sort of richer dialogue with people as well through chat and everything. But it's a really nice ecosystem.
I started my Substack about four weeks ago. So yeah, I wasn't best pleased when I found out that Twitter wasn't going to be favouring those links earlier in the week. But yeah, I've been on Notes and it's lovely. I quite like it. I've been over on Notes quite a lot in the last couple of days. It's nice. You're seeing those short pieces from people whose Substacks you've already subscribed to. So they're people that I'm interested in hearing from them. They're talking about subjects that I'm really engaged in. Yeah, I think Elon should be worried, to be quite honest.
So my understanding is like Suze has her Substack. So if I go to her Substack page where her newsletters are, then that's where I could see the notes, right? Isn't that correct? That's how it works.
So you can see the notes in the app, essentially. But if you're just subscribed to Substack, normally most people would get it through their email, and that's the thing. But increasingly, they're starting to push people to read through their app because I think they're going to start doing a better job with statistics and that sort of thing and analytics. But yeah, the interesting thing is they've already given you sort of like for you and then other people feeds, if that makes sense, with the subscribed and bestseller type stuff. So they're desperately trying to keep their sort of brainy, people who are making the money, people happy as well. But I think it's slowly days, but they're doing a reverse Twitter, if that makes sense, aren't they? They're starting out small and probably adding on to it. But I also don't think they need to do an awful lot more, really. Just keep the good stuff coming and have a good search, really.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for sharing that with us. I think George was next.
Thanks. I don't want to reiterate all the things that went wrong with Elon's thing, except to say that it was an unbelievably ragged start, and through the whole thing was handled quite ineptly, as if nobody had ever done a space before. And what it was sadly lacking was a professional moderator. They needed a professional moderator who knew how to bring people up. When Elon finally, actually, the interviewer kind of bowed out. He had one foot out the door, like the last part of the session, and Elon sort of took it over.
And Suze, I saw you put in the nest, and I meant to put this up too because towards the end, George, I heard the guy interviewing James Clayton say that he was done with his questions, and Elon wanted to go ahead and start a Q&A. I thought that was actually very cool. No, he didn't know how, but there's this picture. Suze just put this up that the reporter took a picture of him because he does look quite confused. But I like that he wanted to hear from the listeners and take some questions. Although I have to say though, George, he only brings up the same people. The people that were on that, got the mic is the same people that were in his previous spaces. He only has a small inner circle because he doesn't, want anybody doing anything that'll catch him off guard, I'm sure is what it's about.
Well, my speculation would be that he really doesn't quite know how to handle people. He doesn't know how to put somebody on mute. He doesn't feel the safety that we feel, that, we can mute everybody. We can put somebody on mute. We know how to block them. We know, nobody's going to get more than 3 seconds of really bad stuff out before we kill them on a space if we're experienced. So he must intuitively know that he doesn't know how to do any of that. So anybody could come up and disrupt the hell out of the space, and it would take him minutes to get it all straightened out, and it would take us seconds. So I think he probably knows it. So who can blame him? I mean, we do the same thing. We only let people up who we know, who looks legitimate to us, or whatever. We try to minimize that kind of thing. I think he takes it to the extreme. But you're right. He almost only lets up Ian and those other guys. Ian asked some very good questions. They asked some very good confronting kind of.
Well, I was thrilled to hear, them asking him about the desktop for Spaces so we could use a better mic, because not everybody's techie like some of us and know what gear to have, where we can bypass. But, you got to put some money into it. It's not an easy just plug and play. But can you imagine just plugging your mic into the computer and going that route? How nice would that be?
But he was totally at a loss, though. He didn't know how to. He first of all, he said, I can't see who's requesting the mic. Was requesting to speak, and he was like completely at a loss. The whole thing was just a complete disaster. I mean, if I were training him as a moderator, I'd have to give him an F- for his first attempt.
Well, he should fly us in, George, so we can teach him how to use this properly. And next up is Morgan. Hey, Morgan.
Hi, both. Firstly, also really interested in the Substack thing. So I haven't been able to try that yet, but I've been following Substack's slow progress towards this. And I think it is really interesting. So calling it a reverse Twitter is I think, right. They added a kind of a chat for your subscribers recently, which was implemented very nicely. So I think it looks like a network where you have people who are writing interesting things. They're pretty serious people. They're committed. It has inbuilt monetization. There are ways now to talk very easily with the people who are reading their work. And now there's a way for those people who are reading it to share it more broadly with the rest of the network there. So it is kind of impressive how they've been building this out stage by stage. So yeah, just that thought. The other one is that a thing that was also in the news today and yesterday, and it was related to the BBC thing, was NPR leaving Twitter. And of course, without going into what that particular dispute is, it is notable, I think, for us because NPR were one of the early news organizations who were really enthusiastically into Twitter. So they hosted a lot early on. We had Matt Adams, who was often on different social audio platforms experimenting and was a big advocate for this, I think, within that realm of journalism. So it's sad to see them go. But it also feels to me like this is a marker of a sort of shift of composition of who's hosting spaces that we've seen, with media organizations doing it less. And of course, to what extent this is true, but the exodus of journalists from Twitter. So the other one is Bloomberg Opinion, that we will know, I think, pretty well. They were very frequent hosters, and I haven't posted this yet, but looking at their hosting patterns in Spaces dashboard, round about when Elon took over, they were hosting a lot, many spaces a month. And it's gone right down to just 3 spaces in March and no spaces so far in April on the opinion account. So we are seeing this sort of tapering off of the early media organizations that were really invested in spaces. And they're being replaced, I think, by more homegrown hosts. As we know, spaces there's still a lot of spaces being done. But who's doing them? It seems to be changing.
Yeah, great insights. Very interesting. Definitely, there's definitely less of, as you say, those kind of more established, the broadcasters, the publishers that we had seen taking to spaces really regularly. There do seem to be an awful lot less of them around, certainly.
And Morgan, I wanted to ask you about your tweet from last night about noticing all those bots on Spaces right around the time Elon's interview was going on. What was your thought on that?
Yeah, so somebody else raised the alarm on that and was like, well, this seems very unusual. He used the term juiced, that all of these spaces, you could look at the top 100 spaces, and I think something like 40 of them had over 1,000 people in, which, if you're used to looking at Spaces dashboard, English language spaces, stands out. Maybe you'd see a couple over 1,000, but not like that. And I don't know what was going on. So the first suggestion was, oh, look, is this a wave of bots? You've seen something like this before. And I hadn't twigged that Elon was going to go live. But after reading today, it looks like the other possibility is just their way of counting who was live in a room was broken. It wasn't bots, perhaps. It was just we were seeing numbers that were not true. And it's not clear what's going on. I mean, I hoped Andrew could do it because Spaces dashboard is still reporting 3.3 million people in total went to Elon Space. And that's not true. It was 500,000 live. And in fact, it's about 2 million now with the replays. So the data that Spaces API is putting out is at the moment not trustworthy. So the way that they're counting attendance seems to go off. Now, today it looks like it's back to normal. So hopefully that's been fixed. But perhaps interesting thing to happen just at the point that Elon's going live. I mean, the last thought on that is, Suze, you said when we see really large numbers in the spacebar, it attracts loads of people in. So we all saw like 2-3 million and dived in. But if you look at the actual turnout total, it didn't go up that much. So the algorithm space they did was something like 520,000, I think, total live. And this one was, I forget the exact one, it was 592. So even with this big advert at the top with millions of people in, we didn't see a huge number of extra people pour into the space based off seeing that in the spacebar. So it's his best space so far, but it still wasn't like hugely big live turnout. It did very well in recordings, though, and I'm sure the BBC has a lot to do with that.
And I think I saw one of your tweets say that it was kind of in line with these other numbers that have been to his other spaces, according to that 594,000, whatever it was, number. That's kind of more in line with what we would have expected. But yeah, as you say, it's obviously not drawn loads and loads more people in. Yeah, very odd. There's gremlins.
And next up, we have Jason from Bunsen and Beaker. How's it going?
Hi, hello. I'm on holidays, so I can hit one of these spaces for once. It's awesome. So yeah, just on this whole Substack thing you guys were discussing, we've built our Substack subscribers up, to something that I'm pretty proud of. And when that went away, I was like, oh my goodness. I was a little frustrated, but we found a workaround. But anyways, the whole point of notes, though, that I find really interesting is for people that have a Substack. Everybody here is thinking in terms of Twitter sometimes, but there are people on Substack who have massive, massive TikTok accounts, and they have huge newsletters on Substack. And TikTok isn't the best way to have a conversation, really. But through Substack, you can, and that notes feature is like a very, very pared down Twitter. It's a feed. You can tweet, quote unquote tweet. You can restack, which is like a retweet, and you can add photos. And some savvy creators that have hopped on that are not using Twitter at all, but are maybe on Instagram or TikTok, like the short form video stuff. That's going to be really, really beneficial to them. And we started it. I just sent out a really silly join us on notes because it's going to be part of my routine to post something once a day on notes for all of our Substack subscribers. So I thought I would just mention that. And I do like the ability to have audio, like as you guys are podcast hosts yourself. It is pretty cool that you can have little audio stuff there, and the people on Substack are there to read and possibly listen. So, anyways, it's good for me as a creator.
Jason, are you using the audio stuff over there?
I have the Science Podcast on Substack's podcast. Yep. And I love it because our downloads have gone way up. Like it is I don't know what it is, but you can like post every day everywhere and it doesn't hit everybody. So with the newsletter, people who like, there's some people that just really love the Substack app, and having our podcast there has been great. And then I read the newsletter and have it as a voiceover. It takes like 10 minutes. So I think it's cool.
Yeah, and I've heard quite a few people that are doing that it's actually the audio layer is a read out version of the newsletter. And some people are then putting that behind the paywall. So that's if people subscribe, they can have the audio version of it. Otherwise, free version is reading it. And, I really like that idea. I think that could really work. And I do wonder whether or not they'll incorporate audio into that notes. A bit of me wants them to, obviously, because I love audio. And a bit of me doesn't want them to, because I just love the simplicity of notes at the moment and the way that it is. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and my voiceover, like once it's done, it's like, hey, do you want me to put that on your RSS feed? And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It could be like a self-contained podcast episode. Kind of neat.
That's very cool. Boy, it's making me rethink things, because when we lost review over on Twitter, when Elon took that away from us, I switched to Beehive. Matt Navarra had talked about it, and that's where he decided to go. And I looked at Substack, I looked at Beehive, and Beehive looked really attractive, and that's where I've been. But I don't know. It's sounding really interesting with Substack, these features, and to have the ability to do audio, that's very enticing.
I have really, really enjoyed putting mine together. I have to admit that the thought of putting a newsletter together I've avoided it for so long, but finally got down to doing it last month. And actually, I've really enjoyed putting together the Substack. It feels like my own little playground for audio, really, and letting people know interesting things that I've found along the way. A lot like doing this, really. It's about finding those little stories and little things that you think, oh, someone else might find that really interesting. Let's talk about it, or let's do something with it. So yeah, it's kind of the newsletter version, I guess, in a funny kind of way. But yeah, Stop, Rewind, Play. I've put it up in the nest in case anybody would like to subscribe, or at least wants to go over there and have a look at what Substack is all about. It's lots of fun.
I'm a subscriber and I love it. It's a great newsletter. I highly recommend it to everyone here, because, it's basically a continuation of this space, talking about audio and social audio. Is very well done, Suze. You've done a tremendous job. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.